All right. Well, hi guys. As Neil said, I'm Reuben Langdon. You probably know that because you're here. Thanks for being here. Um, so I'd like today to get into the topic of ETs. What is an ET? Start to define it a little bit more, and then share some of the insights that I've received from doing this investigation in this realm for over a decade now. Some of you I've already mentioned in the comments, but back in 2013, I co-produced the event, the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, which was a 5-day mock trial, mock congressional hearing with 6 former members of Congress and over 40 witnesses, ex-military, government folks, researchers, all the big names that you already know, Linda Moulton Howell, Richard Dolan, Stanton Friedman, the late Stanton Friedman, the late Roger Lear. We had, it was just an amazing event with a lot of information, insights on the evidence-based side of the ET phenomenon and how our government's been sort of covering that up. Since then, I got into trying to research and do more research and try to understand the phenomenon more. And when you look at the evidence side of things, it's really just one aspect. I started talking to a lot of contactees and people who made claims that they'd been on the ships. And following that rabbit hole, I came across the phenomenon of channeling, which many of you are probably aware of. And I started my show, Interview with Ed, which is now on the Gaia Network, and we're in season 2. And we'll see if a season 3 comes out or not. I'm kind of working on that, but Gaia hasn't committed, so maybe you guys can help me out by messaging them and letting them know that you want a season 3. So it was during those conversations with these people who channel ETs is where I started really getting deep into understanding the phenomenon, understanding what our reality is. And they sort of filled in all of the missing pieces that the evidence-based stuff, research that I had been doing, couldn't fill in. It was remarkable, actually, that all the evidence stuff and the contactees laid out a nice, clear groundwork for this type of research. But within that groundwork, there was lots of holes. And then just like a perfect puzzle, the channeled stuff just filled all that in and got me the understanding I have today, which is constantly expanding, constantly developing and evolving. So, so here I am today to share some of these insights, some of this knowledge that over a decade of research has come to fruition here. I'm trying to see, let's see, where did Neil, he told me about I'm trying to go into is it chats? Q&A, there it is. All right, so I don't have a full presentation. I have a presentation sort of prepared, but not a PowerPoint, because I like to interact with the audience and kind of gauge where they're at, because sometimes I can go a little too far, too fast, and go over people's heads, or maybe the audience might be, it might be boring if I'm going too slow. So I really would like you guys to give me feedback and ask questions during this process. And my first question for you guys is, do you believe in ETs? And I would probably assume the answer is yes. That's why you're here. But what I want to say is, with that belief, with that idea, it's going to vary from person to person. But what I guess the unifying part of that is that we all have this curiosity. And my good friend Jeremy Corbell, who was the director for the Bob Lazar film, if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's amazing. he was also on Rogan with Lazar and David Fravor, and he's deep into the evidence-based stuff. And he has this great saying called weaponized. He says, "Weaponize your curiosity." And I think what the idea or the belief of ETs, what it does is it really weaponizes our curiosity. It allows us to start digging and start going deep. And that's what happened to me back in 2007, when I had my first sighting and started, sort of had that red pill moment. And I want to share and use that. I want to share you guys to use that as a weapon to go further down these rabbit holes, to really understand the whole function of reality and the phenomenon. And we'll call it the phenomenon because I think it goes beyond ETs. Not that I think, I know it goes beyond ETs. And when I first started researching, I was like, ETs are real, but mermaids, fairies, gnomes, those things are all fake. Those are just fairy tales that people, made up or whatever. But ETs are real. And the further I went down this path to try to understand what is an ET, the more I got to understand that, well, all of it is sort of an ET, including the gnomes and the fairies and the elves and all of these other phenomenon that we associate as just out there stuff. So just reading some of the questions here. So using that tool that you now have of curiosity, we can go down this rabbit hole of trying to understand what's happening here. And what I've come to understand is that it's going to be a different understanding for each person based on their belief structures. And I kind of use this triad here, beliefs. I don't know if you guys can see this. Can you see this? Kind of go over here with it. Thoughts and emotions. This is kind of the triad that creates us. Each one an individual. This triad creates our vibrational frequency, which I'm sure you guys have heard a million times if you've been into this stuff. Nikola Tesla, he sort of says his famous quote, if you want to understand the world or the universe, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. Maybe we've got that out of order a little bit, but we are vibrational beings. Everything in the universe is vibrating at a certain harmonic, and our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs are the sort of the roots or the baseline of what create our vibrational frequency. And they're constantly shifting, as Bashar says, 1 billion times a second. But our baseline beliefs allows us to sort of experience this world, this reality, through a specific lens. And that's why I say this phenomenon is going to be manifested in a different way for each and every single one of us. We have collective beliefs. If you subscribe to a certain religion, or right now on the news or on TV in our societies and cultures, we sort of have these base beliefs that we subscribe to or we don't subscribe to. And we're seeing the UFO belief system sort of work its way into our modern day storyline, which is, as we can see, as I just mentioned, David Fravor and the Tic Tac UFO. Jeremy Corbell is doing an amazing job of really knocking on that collective wall to instill or do an inception moment with the collective belief system around the ET phenomenon. And of course, we have films and television to explain, to sort of give us ideas. Oh, maybe they're bad or they're evil and they're going to come and attack us. That's not really helping the situation in my opinion, but it is helping in just the idea that there's something outside of this physical reality we call the Earth experience that we can start to connect to. And the thoughts and the emotions come from our belief structure. So based on that specific belief structure, we start to think about these things. We start to then feel emotions about these things, which then allows us to experience things in a specific way. Now, some people might say, well, I never believed in ETs or UFOs, and then I had this experience. Subconsciously, though, there are specific beliefs that may be unconscious, that have been melded through our DNA, through our experiences with different with our parents and different religions and these kinds of things. So it can happen without us being fully aware of it. I think Carl Jung and his work in the dream state, if when you look at these things that happen sort of out of nowhere, you're like, what? How did that happen? What is that for? When you go and you do some deep subconscious work, unconscious work, working with these other deeper aspects of the self, then we can find that there is sort of a connection and a through line. So that's why the definition of this phenomenon, it can be all over the place. It's because we have a large world with 7 billion different people with different ideas and different ways of thinking. And what we're trying to do is unify this idea of an ET, so everyone can sort of have a basic understanding of what it is. However, until we get that unified projection, I think it's going to manifest itself for different people in different ways. Now, I'm seeing in the chat, I'm seeing different, all kinds of things, but I'm also seeing, okay, here we go in the Q&A. So what are ways that individuals can contact ETs? What ET species are welcoming, opening, being contact? So great, let's go there next. So when it comes to contact and contact work, this is something that I've been adamant about in the past couple of years. I just got back from Arizona doing a contact retreat with Lisa Royale, who has been in my series quite a bit. And she does amazing contact seminars. She used to work with Dr. Stephen Greer, and she was part of his CE5 team in the early days. So, and she's developed her own protocols in addition to the sort of the traditional, more well-known Greer CE5 protocols. And what we're finding through this contact work, through her version of the contact work, what this experience we just had in Arizona, is it's not lights in the sky. It's not necessarily the typical UFO, the idea of a UFO flying through the air and flashing some lights and maybe landing or not landing or hovering or doing what its thing. Yes, Lisa Royal Alt. So what we experienced and what I've talked about in the show a little bit is it can manifest itself in many different ways. And this last weekend, or 2 weekends ago, what we experienced was more of what most people would probably think of like a ghost phenomenon. And she has a couple of ET beings, one from Sirius and one from the Pleiades that she works with pretty closely. She's able to connect to in the channeling state. And what they were able to do is help because they're, thousands of years more advanced, if not millions, than we are. And they have more awareness technologies, however you want to, define that term technology. I use it lightly because it's not necessarily like a flying saucer technology, but a spiritual technology, where they're able to connect us to a group of people in that same land that we were doing the contact work in 500 years into the future. And what we experienced was, first of all, this strange cloud formation started to form, and temperatures started dropping, but in pockets. It was really, some people described almost like a cold freeze when it was 90 degrees outside. Two people really felt a very, very sudden drop in temperature. I saw things coming out of the corner of my eyes. I saw actual people, or what appeared to be a humanoid walking in the shadows. And many people said, we all sat in meditation, and I also got the guidance to start doing some qigong and breath work to create a field, so to say, to help grid the area, which this wasn't even spoken about during the retreat or during this experience. I just got the intuition to start doing that. And it turned out afterwards or during it that there was that kind of stuff from the other side. These people from the future were doing a similar type of energy work to create the portal. So just using that as an example, that this phenomenon can come and create doorways in all different ways. And we can connect to future versions of ourselves. We can connect to other ET races, and we can connect to other realms. For example, the fairy realm, or mermaids and these kinds of things that I mentioned, unicorns even. And because it all, as we've heard so many times, time and space is an illusion, and it's really about harmonics and frequency, that we can traverse these realms and get from one place to another, not necessarily with a craft. And as we go deeper into understanding the phenomenon, I think we're going to redefine collectively what an ET is. I certainly have myself, going from just lights in the sky and beings in a craft flying around, to now understanding that it's a whole gamut, all of it, all of these different types of phenomenon are interlinked and interwoven, from the dream state to the actual awakened state, to psychedelic states with using plant medicine, sacred plant medicines, and doing that kind of work. So, oh yeah, speaking of unicorns, that's me on a unicorn. So I'm gonna look here into the questions and just sort of gauge where we're at with everybody. Does anybody have anything to comment or question on based on where we're going with this? Synchronicity, yes, psilocybin can be a great tool for contact. However, it is a tool, and be very cautious, because so since it's been brought up, since I just mentioned plant medicines and this type of work, we can use, oh, there it is. Okay, I needed to scroll down. We can use plant medicines to make contact in our sort of in our mental body, or in an etheric way, because it's again shifting the frequency. Just as I was saying with Nikola Tesla's quote, we're actually using an outside substance to help us shift the frequency, and they can be great tool, but they must be used responsibly, because when you're opening that door, it's a two-way pump. You can open it going in all sorts of directions. So it requires a lot of focus and attention to make sure you're opening the right doors. The plant medicines are sort of, they just blow all the doors open, and then you have to walk through the right ones. Otherwise, if not, you can really open yourself up to some negative energies. And yes, intention is critical. And in addition to attention, I want to use the word I just picked up. Well, we'll skip over that. Actually, it's going to be a little complicated. So, but yes, absolutely use intention, using meditation, typically using traditional indigenous shamanic ways of going into these sacred medicine circles is, in my opinion, sort of the safest and best way, because the shamans who use these plant medicines are experienced. They've traversed these realms. Psychonauts is a term we've used in our collective. They know the realms, they know the energies, they can feel and get a reading on these things, and they can help guide you to do the specific work that you need to be doing, or connect to the beings that will help you in your evolution, as opposed to latch onto you and bog you down, which is quite possible. Even though I talk about fairies and unicorns and mermaids and all of this, happy stuff, ETs with higher vibrational frequencies, there's a whole gamut of the other spectrum out there that we can definitely open ourselves up to without the proper focus and intention and frequency. So the best way to make sure that you're connecting to beings of higher frequency is to raise your own frequency, and is to do the internal work. And plant medicines and shamanic practices are a great way to sort of do that work. And I would suggest doing some internal work before you even decide to go and make contact. Make sure you're in a clean energy field. And there's all sorts of tools and practices to do that. Nature is a great way to do that. Different energetic spots of the planet, ley lines, and these kinds of things. We can't hear you, he says. We can hear you fine now. Okay, maybe my internet was a little goofy. So yes, so anyways, there's all sorts of tools, including the actual earth and nature and grid work. There's a lot of power spots or portals all over the planet that tend to be sacred spots from the indigenous. Even a lot of churches have been built on top of these sacred spots, and that's why they're considered, holy places. And you can use those to actually help with the contact work, because of the energetic fields that they create. They create portals into these other realms, and so that's other ways you can use. Let's see, Tibetans moving things with their horns, metal. Okay, yeah, harmonics are definitely, that's what we're all made of. We're made of vibrational frequencies. Cymatics. I'm sure some of the other speakers here have gone deep into that. Okay, somebody wanted to talk about hybrid children. So during my exploration, early on in the days, I started to hear about, this was before the channeling phenomenon, I started to interview contactees and talk to people who'd been on the ships. And many of these contactees who weren't necessarily spiritual, or didn't really go into the channeling phenomenon at all. That wasn't their thing. But they all had similar stories talking about how they were on board ships, interacting with their children, their hybrid children, and teaching them things or showing them how things work here on Earth. And going deeper into that subject later, I started asking in the channeling world, these different people who channel these different beings. And all of these beings talked about the same thing. They all said that, yes, hybrid children do exist, and that people are taken in the ships, taken to the ships, usually at night or sometimes in dreams, and they're working with their children to prepare them for coming to Earth. Sounds like a far out there wild story, I know, but when you start talking to enough people and you start seeing the synchronicities, you really have to kind of say, okay, something's going on here. And the way I've interpreted it now is, if you look at what is, there's many different aspects of this phenomenon, and using the hybrid children aspect, let's sort of dissect that a little bit. For many of these contactees, it is a very visceral, real experience. They are having this experience, no doubt. I don't doubt it at all at this point, because I've talked to so many people about it, and I personally have also had connection to my own hybrid child through actually through the plant medicine work and through dreams. And what he told me, my son, is he doesn't exist. It's okay. He exists, but he doesn't have to exist. And this is where things get a little complicated. This is kind of like the double slit experiment, the famous quantum experiment, where the observation effect, if you see it, it can, or a particle could be a wave, or it can act as a wave, or it can act as a what's the word I'm looking for, as a particle. The collapsing the wave function, that whole idea is basically, if you look at it, it exists. And that was kind of this example in the sample that he gave me, is if I decide to put my attention there, then it's real. And this is where, yes, Joe Dispenza makes this work very clear, exactly. And this is where our beliefs, thoughts, and emotions are so critical to creating the reality we desire. And we forget this. If I basically, what the messages I got from my child, I know this sounds crazy, but is, he said, if you don't focus on me, I'm not gonna die, if that makes sense. He's gonna exist in another parallel timeline, and another version of me. It might be interacting with him, but he doesn't have to exist in this reality. And I'm not killing him or destroying him or anything nefarious by not putting my attention there, by focusing somewhere else. He still exists in another space-time continuum. And if I decide to focus there, then I can make that connection, and perhaps someday manifest them into this reality. There's a lot of different things that I believe that would go into manifesting that reality, as far as collective beliefs. And the whole idea, and this is part of why I'm doing the show, is to put this information out there even more. To, in a sense, I'm doing my seed work by interviewing all of these different channelers and getting this information out, so the collective can then become more accepting of the idea of hybrid children. And maybe one day, when we can all agree and be okay with that sort of idea, then we can start manifesting physically these children into our reality. And how would that show up? Well, just like this contact work that I described this past weekend, when you get enough people with like minds start to call in the children, so to say, then they can actually probably start to manifest in different ways, from coming through the fog in the forest, or actual ships dropping them off, and these kinds of things. So I hope I'm getting to this idea of hybrid children and how it can manifest for some people, and it can just be a complete silly fairy tale for others. So, and that's like with everything. That's with the unicorns and the fairies and everything else. For some people, fairies are very real. They talk to them daily. They interact with them. We see some of our animals can do that as well. And you know, I believe it's a very real world. I believe there's fairies in our backyard. We have fairy circles, and we can see physical manifestations in a sort of naturistic way to then support this idea of, through this other, maybe through another dimension and a different lens, we can see the actual fairies and the actual reality of what's going on. We have lots of movies that sort of go about this, that go into that. So I'm just going to read some of the comments I'm getting. Here we go. Third dimension, fourth, is it like an outline, for example, a lizard and an insect? Yes, okay. So another great way to make contact is through everything we have on this planet, nature, and just talking about the fairies and talking about insects and birds and these types of things. So what I've discovered and learned through these interviews is that all of the beings here on the planet, cats, dogs, animals, trees, insects, there is a higher dimensional version of those beings. Let's take the praying mantis as an example. So the praying mantis, and we hear in our ufology lore that of these mantis beings, and I've had a visitation from a few times, and they kind of look like praying mantis, and that's why they're just known. We classify them as mantis beings. And what I've been told and what I've experienced is that we can actually use the physical praying mantis, as a tool to actually connect to the higher dimensional version of them. And this goes with all of the other insects and everything else in our reality, is that we can use any of those things as a tool. Cats, if you are a cat owner, I have a new cat that I'm connecting with. And cats, dogs, cats seem to be very multidimensional. I might be a little biased because I have a cat right now, but you can actually use them and connect with their energy to connect to a higher, greater version of them, just like we have sort of our higher selves in higher dimensions that we interact. You know, Daryl, who channels Bashar, and Wendy channeling the Palladians, also Lisa, who channels Sasha, the Palladian. These are all aspects of her or them from other dimensional realms, and they're able to connect to. Somebody asked about Roxy. Yes, she's connecting to all kinds of different versions of herself. And we can use anything as a tool to make that connection. And in fact, we are connecting to higher dimensional beings, just not aware of it, as we are looking at the fairy circles and seeing the growth of how the plant life may grow in a specific way. Well, we call those fairy circles because in another dimension, the actual fairies are doing some cool things there, and there's bleed throughs in these different realities where they are fueling that portal was maybe a little bit thinner in that spot, and we can connect to those areas. And that's why I was talking about using ley lines and other things to connect to these other realms. So there's all kinds of things we can use to connect these higher dimensional realms. In fact, we're doing it, we're just doing it unconsciously. And part of this third, fourth dimension, what's more of a third, I call it densities. And if you've watched the show, we've gone deep into understanding densities. And densities is sort of, the way I see it is dimensions is more of a sort of a space and time understanding, or a perception of space and time, where densities would be a label for different levels of consciousness. So we as humans are third density moving into the fourth. We're sort of in a transition period right now. And Rob has a great saying. He says the densities correlate with the chakra points. So we just think of us moving from sort of our solar plexus into our heart, and we can use this tool and sort of know that, you know, I know when I was a kid, we used to say, I've got a gut feeling that something's off. And now naturally we're just saying, my heart says, you know. So this is sort of a way to understand that there is an evolution happening from the solar plex chakra into the heart. Now, everything else, as we evolve, everything else simultaneously is evolving in these different states of consciousness. For example, our plants or our animals would be more of a second density consciousness and moving into the third density. So we can see how that is developing through all the many cat videos and dog videos on the internet, and how a lot of these animals are starting to form egos. And I say that not in a negative way, but they're starting to form personalities and have all kinds of things that maybe back in the day animals probably didn't have as many. Maybe it's because we have the internet and we can put a lens on these things. But personally, I never saw as many unique individual plant or animals as I do now. And we're starting to see different interactions of animals. They're letting their walls down as far as if you see all these animals interacting with each other. I don't think that happened before. So different species of animals are sort of caretaking for each other. And we can see that reality, the animal kingdom is also leveling up. We're leveling up. Plants, as we elevate, we can then communicate with plants in a more cohesive way, because their frequency is also raising, and they're shifting into more of a third density consciousness. And the minerals and the rocks. And we're seeing this with crystals, and how we're starting to communicate with crystals more and more. And actually, crystal skulls, a lot of people have experiences with those. I've interacted with some myself. And we're seeing this entire evolution happening, this big evolutionary jump that's starting to happen right now as we're going through this ascension process. Some people like to label, or transition, basically going from third to fourth density. So the dimensions, as our consciousness expands and our awareness expands, so does our perception of reality. And that's where we get to see the expansion of dimensions, going from, say, fourth to fifth dimension. We're in a fourth dimensional, Einstein and everybody says there are 4 dimensions in our reality, sort of the X, Y, Z, and then space-time. So if you guys know, I forget which is which, but so I probably got those out of order. But basically, space-time being the 4th component, space and time being interconnected, and you can't pull one out from the other. As we're expanding our consciousness, we're starting to get into a non-linear way of seeing things, or I should say not seeing things, experiencing things. So this is why many of the ETs and other beings can sort of traverse space and time, is because they're not bound by a linear sense of time. And as we move into these higher densities, our awareness and understanding of how space and time works becomes more fluid. And we're seeing this with inventions like time crystals, that it's like a perpetual motion thing that basically is what were they saying? It's like a new state of matter, and it can do all kinds of crazy things, basically bending our understanding of linear time. So these are all of these examples are starting to pop up as we evolve, and I'm seeing constantly, daily, new discoveries, new things that are just proving that we're moving very rapidly. And I'm just going to go to the questions now. So in your experience with your hybrid child and the program that facilitated the child to come, do you feel that your free will has been influenced or violated in any way? Or do you recall your decision to choose and participate in the? So great question. I guess everybody can see the question. So this is from an anonymous attendee. So the idea of the free will being influenced or violated, I would say no, because one, there's an aspect of me that agreed to that interaction. What inspired the show Interview with Ed was my talking with Wendy Kennedy back in, I think, 2013 or so. I used to hold ET. Oh, you can't see other questions. Okay. Well, then I should read it out loud again. In your experience with your hybrid child and the program that facilitated the child to come to be, do you feel that your free will has been influenced or violated in any way, or do you recall your decision to choose to participate in the hybridization program? So, so back to the story with Wendy Kennedy. So, and then this will answer this. So, I used to have these ET media meetup meetings at my office in the marina. I had a motion capture studio, visual effects studio, and I had a large space. So the first Tuesday of the month, we invited people in the industry to come over and hang out, and we had special guests, and we talked about ETs. It was a fun time. And Wendy Kennedy showed up, started becoming a regular. Daryl, this is before I even knew Wendy was a channeler. Daryl Anko was a channeler. Nora Harrell, they all came to these meetings. Little did I know that they were these famous channelers. I was talking with Wendy one night after we wrapped, and she told me at the time, with the most fascinating thing, I was talking to her about abductions, and she said, well, it's a soul contract. And when she said that, the light bulb went off, and it seemed to fill in all of the gaps for all of the questions that I had about the abduction phenomenon. And so basically, what is a soul contract? So from my understanding from going into this is that going into the show is that prior to our incarnations on this planet, we make agreements with other species, other versions of ourselves, other dimensional realms, that we are going to, we sort of like have a life review before we go into our life, right? So we say, this is the roadmap we're going to travel. Obviously, it could go this way or that way. There's many forks in the road, but we sort of agree to allow our bodies to be used for these certain types of experimentations. And then that idea of a soul contract is just that, is that prior to our incarnation, we're going to allow this to happen. Now, we then incarnate into this reality. We forget everything that we knew before, and we start from scratch, and we're going through this reality, making our choices, doing our thing. And all of a sudden, some of us realize we're on ships, and if you're a female, your eggs are taken. If you're male, your semen's taken. And it's being used to, in these genetic experiments, to sort of create hybridized children. Crazy. But just like my hybrid child told to me, it's something that we can choose to, in a sense, ignore. The people who don't, who seem to can't choose to ignore it, it's my belief that subconsciously there is something there that they need to look at, that they need to go deep in to understand. And usually all the people that I've talked to that have gone inward and done some sort of spiritual work, that they come to terms to these experiences, come to terms in the sense that it was a soul contract, that it was not against their will. And some folks like Kim Carlsberg, famous abductee who used to work, she was the co-creator of Baywatch. She had horrific experiences for a long, long time. And then she said, I don't want this to happen anymore. I'm done with this. And she just literally commanded it to stop, and it stopped. A lot of times we forget how much power we have. We think we are the victims of certain things, and we let these things happen to us until we say enough is enough and simply command it to stop. And I've talked to many, many abductees, people who had sort of negative experiences. And when they said, no more, I'm done, it stopped. So I don't think these programs, I don't think the people being taken, it is against their will. I know a lot of people may disagree with me, but perhaps they haven't fully engaged their power of sort of incantation or demanding if they really wanted to stop, or other people who it's constantly happening to are actually invoking that kind of thing and wanting it to. So after my experience with the child, I sort of took that as, okay, I understand, thank you. And I've toyed with the idea, and I've opened that door a little bit here and there. But right now, just with my life and what's going on, I'm like, I can't handle a hybrid child right now. So guess what? I haven't had any contact unless I invite it in, unless I say, okay, I want to make the connection, and let's do that. And then I can do that. So hopefully that answers that question. Where are we? Seeing more and more. Some mantis beings. Let's see what other questions we have. Okay, this is sort of related to the last one. Let's go here first. Is it possible that we go through this lifetime without having conscious knowing or contact with our hybrid children or ETs that we are working with unconsciously? Absolutely. I was having contact without knowing it until I did the interview with Bridget Nielsen, and she helped bring that child out. And then at that time, I was very skeptical. I was like, this is kind of, no, I don't know. And then she brought him out, and then I went into meditation, and sure enough, I did make the connection. And then as I was making the connection, it's funny how it unfolded. When I started making that connection, I literally started having past memories of times in my life where, for example, my mom had mentioned that she had been taken when she was young, and that I'd completely forgotten. And then I reached out to her, and she's like, oh yeah, I did have something, but she kind of forgot. And I realized that if you open that door, and if it's something that you want to pursue, in a sense, we will create the history. We will start to move into the vibrational frequency timeline that occurred. So to validate the reality for us even more. So it goes back to, you know, what are your beliefs? What are your thoughts and your emotions? They're creating the now reality, which then connects you to a different version, a different past than where you are right now.